Landing on my heart, Chapter 25. If it was the first time he heard Cecile Ruan say something like this, Louis Fu would be furious. If it was the second time he heard it, his blood would rush. But now, Louis Fu sighed, and there was no other emotion except helplessness. He turned around in silence, went to the table and got scissors, took the hairy crab apart, and cleaned up all the rope packages on the table. "Let's eat." Cecile Ruan ran to wash his hands and sat down at the table first, while Louis Fu went to wash his hands. Glancing at the food on the table, Cecile Ruan noticed a show ice bag next to it. When you open it, inside is a cream puff. She wanted a sweet tooth more than a hot meal. And after breaking the puffs, the soft cream came out, and Cecile Ruan immediately took a big bite. After eating the puffs, she sucked the cream on her fingers while looking for tissues. Louis Fu came out just at this time after washing his hands. All in Xinjiang Literature City, his gaze fell on Cecile Ruan's fingers and lower lip. His eyes suddenly darkened a little, and the position of his chest suddenly itched. "Wipe." He casually handed a tissue to the cabinet behind him. Cecile Ruan wiped his fingers, and the two sat down facing each other. Louis Fu didn't speak, picked up his chopsticks to eat, while Cecile Ruan took a sip of soup and saw Louis Fu on the other side, feeling that life was quite wonderful. She never dreamed that she would eat peacefully at the same table with Louis Fu. However, she did not forget her real purpose for letting Louis Fu in. The spoon stirred gently in the bowl for a while, and she stared at the dish in front of her, wondering how to phrase it. Just now Louis Fu said that Jing Yuan is the daughter of the owner of the company he works with. Cecile Ruan knows this, but she doesn't know that Louis Fu and Jing Yuan know each other, and they seem to have a good relationship. After all she knows about Jing Yuan is that she unilaterally watched Jing Yuan's Weibo, but she never really contacted her, not even indirectly. Cecile Ruan always knew that her mood towards Jing Yuan was a little strange. When she accidentally found Jing Yuan's Weibo, she even hoped that she was a pompous rich second generation, full of voice, flying and domineering, gold and jade, and defeated in it, so that her heart would be a little balanced. You don't want your own daughter, run to be someone else's stepmother, but that child is not good, I am not excellent at all. But Jing Yuan is not such a person. At least Cecile Ruan's one-sided understanding of her through Weibo, although she also spends a lot of money and likes to post a luxurious life on social networking, but you can see her complaining on Weibo about missing out on a first-class scholarship, and sometimes you can see her show off the awards won by her photography works, and even know from Weibo that her 3 dogs and a cat were picked up. Cecile Ruan even watched those cats and dogs on her Weibo become fat little by little. This made Cecile Ruan's hatred of Jing Yuan become unjustified, and he felt like a villain hiding in the shadows and peeping. But while she hated her mentality, she was curious about whether Jing Yuan was really the same as she showed on Weibo in private, and she was also curious about her real relationship with Dong Xian. And Louis Fu seems to be the only line connecting her and Jing Yuan. That, Cecile Ruan was about to speak, but Fu Ming also spoke. "You." The two were stunned for a moment, and Cecile Ruan's careful thinking suddenly retracted, and immediately said, "You say it first." Louis Fu said, "Are you finishing flying next week?" Cecile Ruan nodded. Moments later, Cecile Ruan suddenly looked up. "Finished." Louis Fu swept his gaze and seemed to be smiling. "What else do you want me to say?" Cecile Ruan, "Do you think you are from the Diyun Society, and there are people who look forward to listening to you all day?" Cecile Ruan didn't answer, looked down and took a sip of soup. "What did you want to say just now?" Louis Fu asked. Originally, he had retracted his careful thoughts, but now that Louis Fu took the initiative to bring it up, Cecile Ruan couldn't hold back. She pondered for a moment and slowly spoke. "What do you think of Jing Yuan?" If Cecile Ruan looked up at this time, he could see that the smile on Louis Fu's mouth disappeared, and he took a deep breath. "How do you know her name?" Cecile Ruan grabbed his spoon and muttered, "You don't care how I know." Louis Fu, "Why do you care so much about her?" Cecile Ruan, "You care why I care about her." All in Xinjiang Literature City. Louis Fu put down his chopsticks and looked solemnly at Cecile Ruan. "As I already said, she is just the daughter of the owner of the company I work with, and her parents are closer to my parents, that's it. Both parents are relatively close." Cecile Ruan stirred the spoon slightly and asked, "What do you think of her?" Letting out a long breath, Louis Fu estimated how much his patience had increased in just a few months, explaining the same thing 3 times. "I've known her for less than 2 years, met no more than 4 times, said no more than 20 words, how do I know how she is? How is she and what does it matter to me?" Cecile Ruan. You're not familiar with her for a long time. Cecile Ruan put down the spoon, his appetite lost and his interest was lacking. Okay, forget it if you don't know. Seeing Cecile Ruan like this, Louis Fu was not in the mood to eat. He put down his chopsticks and looked straight at the other side. Cecile Ruan. What for? You eat more. No appetite. Louis Fu pressed his tongue against his chin, closed his eyes, and spoke. What are you still angry about? Cecile Ruan is also inexplicable. Where am I angry? Louis Fu raised his eyebrows. Go and take a look in the mirror yourself and see what your face looks like. Cecile Ruan touched his face, snorted in his nose, and muttered, haven't I always been like this, and you didn't know me for the first time? Louis Fu sneered, so you also know that you have a bad attitude towards me. Cecile Ruan didn't bother to look at him. If you don't mess with me, I can treat you this way. When did I mess with you? See for yourself what tone of voice you just spoke. You yourself are going to come to me for dinner and are not allowed to speak. Why, am I just a meal? Louis Fu raised a hand and forced himself to compromise. Okay, stop, count me wrong. Cecile Ruan. Originally, you are not right. What is called you are not right, you are quite aggrieved. Fortunately, when the doorbell rang, Cecile Ruan didn't bother to talk to him more, and went to open the door without asking. She moved a lot, and when she opened the door, her face startled the delivery man. No, I'm sorry, the car broke down on the road, I pushed it over, and I registered with the security office for a long time, and I was late, I'm really sorry. Listen, the delivery man has a better attitude than Louis Fu for a few dollars of takeaway, and he still wants to tease the girl, just this attitude to provoke. Cecile Ruan took the takeout and said with a smile, it's okay, you worked hard, I will give you a good review. After speaking, he casually took a side of mineral water from the cabinet on the side and gave it to him. It's hot, you drink some water. The delivery man took the water flattered, and almost wrote a few words of gratitude on his face. Thank you, thank you. Closing the door, Cecile Ruan turned to see Louis Fu sitting at her table like an uncle, looking at her with a calm face, as if she owed him millions. Not wanting to face him face to face again, Cecile Ruan sat down on the sofa with the takeout, quickly took it apart, and ate it with a spoon. You have a good attitude towards the delivery boy. If you go to deliver food, I also have a good attitude towards you. No way, I hate the rich. Louis Fu pressed his neck, half opened his mouth, and let out a long breath. When he looked at Cecile Ruan again, he saw that she was eating the meal that smelled like inferior rapeseed oil, while the delicate meal in front of him was getting cooler a little. I don't know how long it took. Louis Fu slowly stood up. Just as she was about to walk towards Cecile Ruan, her phone rang. Cecile Ruan glanced at it, and Yenin called. What's going on this big night? Cecile Ruan held a spoon in one hand and picked up the phone in the other. Hey, Mr. Yen, what's the matter? Hearing Cecile Ruan's name, Louis Fu's footsteps paused. Over there, Yenin's voice was a little drunk. Did you sleep? Drinking. Some men like to call the woman who has their hearts when they drink too much, but they didn't expect that President Yenin also had this hypocritical disease. In this case, once they talk, it is easy to give the other party a chance to think more, so Cecile Ruan lied, I'm going to sleep soon, is there something wrong? Yenin was silent for a moment and said, alas, I want to talk to you, you. Can you come down for a bit? I'm downstairs from you. Cecile Ruan felt a gaze looking at her behind her, glared back, moved to the corner of the sofa, grabbed the pillow and stuffed it into her arms, and whispered, I'm sorry, I'm already in bed. Alas, Yenin said again, it's okay to talk on the phone for a while. In fact, I really didn't know about that incident last time. I actually broke off with my ex-girlfriend, and that kind of thing won't happen again in the future. Cecile Ruan rubbed his temples. Why are the two men looking for her today, and the president is so idle this year? Mr. Yen, I thought I had made this clear. Alas, it's not early, you rest early. Yenin sighed again and paused for a while before saying, then you rest, I won't disturb you. Cecile Ruan hung up the phone without hesitation, looked up and saw that Louis Fu was still looking at her. Banquet, Cecile Ruan let go of the pillow and glanced up at Louis Fu. The moment his gaze met her, Cecile Ruan coughed, grabbed his chopsticks and bent down to continue eating. The overhead light gradually dimmed, and a clear line of sight pressure hit, and the chopsticks in Cecile Ruan's hand paused, hovering between looking up and not looking up. Who can eat when stared at like this? Just then, Louis Fu's cell phone rang again. It was Bo Yang who called. He actually took time out tonight, and he had to go back to the company for a meeting in the evening, and the time was almost up. All in Jinjiang Literature City. He walked over to Cecile Ruan, glanced at her slowly with his eyes downcast, and suddenly leaned over. Cecile Ruan jerked back and was about to say something, but Louis Fu reached out and picked up his coat, turned around and said, "There is still something wrong with the company. I'm leaving. Walk slowly, don't send it." Louis Fu. Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan said impatiently, "What's wrong again? The takeout is not clean, you eat less." Cecile Ruan was still eating as if she hadn't heard Louis Fu. Until the sound of closing the door, she paused and looked up at the food on the table. When Louis Fu went downstairs, it was already completely dark. He took his coat and walked extremely fast. After a busy day without rest, I took time out of my busy schedule to have a meal with Cecile Ruan, and I was half angry with her, and I didn't know what I was planning. But before he walked out of the hall on the first floor, he saw a familiar figure outside. Yan and hunched his back, leaned against the car body, and lit a cigarette in his hand. Although I didn't see his expression, he exuded an aura of I'm sad and melancholy all over his body, and at first glance he really has the temperament that a lovelorn person should have. Louis Fu originally wanted to pass him directly as if he hadn't seen him, but as he walked down the steps, he paused in his steps and turned around. Banquet. Yan looked up and saw that it was Louis Fu, and did not want to speak. Louis Fu just looked sideways at him and said in a deep voice, "People have sent a circle of friends to connotate you, you are still pestering, can you have a little backbone?" Gate 26. Landing on My Heart. Chapter 26. The reign of midsummer is like a woman's temper, and it comes and goes. Xiaozhen carefully parked the car in the parking lot and entered the elevator. When she rang the doorbell, Cecile Ruan had just finished eating and was clearing the table. Xiaozhen walked in and saw a large number of leftovers on the table. The colors of these basically untouched meals were still very bright, and Cecile Ruan opened the refrigerator and put it halfway through and found that it was almost overwhelmed. Xiaozhen came over to help her pour into the small bowl and asked, "How do you order so many meals alone?" She picked up her plate and glanced at it. "It's still a West Wing banquet, you are extravagant." "Someone else ordered it," Cecile Ruan said. "I didn't eat it alone." "Who's coming?" Xiaozhen closed the refrigerator, turned his head and saw the clay pot rice on the coffee table. "Why is there still clay pot rice?" Cecile Ruan wiped the table, moving sharply, without answering the rhetorical question, "Why are you here? Bring me the trash can." Xiaozhen went according to the words, and also chanted, "There was a car accident on the other side of the viaduct today. I see that the road conditions may be blocked for a long time, and it rains heavily, so I simply came to you to rest. Hey, I just saw our Beihang banquet outside." Cecile Ruan let out an "oh," and Xiaozhen asked again, "Is he still chasing you?" After speaking, Xiaozhen paused for a moment. "Could it be that you had dinner with him just now?" "No, how is it possible? I made it clear to him, but he called me after drinking too much tonight and didn't meet." Cecile Ruan cleared the table, headed to the kitchen, and said, "It's Louis Fu who came to eat." Until she washed her hands and walked out, Xiaozhen was still stunned in place, with an expression of "don't tease me" on her face. "What are you doing?" Cecile Ruan asked. "What are you doing?" Xiaozhen asked rhetorically. "President Fu came to your house for dinner." "Yes, that's him, you heard me right. Why did he come here?" Cecile Ruan didn't answer for a moment. "Why come over?" "Because I felt like he wanted to soak me." "Talk about work." Xiaozhen was stunned for a long time and pronounced a syllable to express her emotions. Talk about work, come to the house to talk." "No, I'm too tired today, he made it easier for me." Xiaozhen nodded doubtfully, thought for a while, and looked at Cecile Ruan mockingly. "President Fu is really considerate of the employees." Cecile Ruan's eyes flicked over, and Xiaozhen immediately said seriously, "Then why doesn't it seem that you all haven't eaten much?" "That's not the point, I'm mad today." What the?" Cecile Ruan pulled Xiaozhen to sit down, told her what happened today, and explained why the meal barely moved. She found that her memory was surprisingly good today, and she actually reviewed the conversation between the two word by word. But, repeating to the back, her voice gradually decreased, and finally touched her chest, and asked cautiously, "Am I not very good-tempered today?" "I don't know if you have a good temper, but I think President Fu has a really good temper." After a while, I calmly recalled it and found that it seemed to be really the case. Cecile Ruan touched his lower abdomen again. "Am I coming soon?" After speaking, he didn't wait for Xiaozhen to answer. He opened the menstrual period recording software and looked at it. It was true. Cecile Ruan quietly bit her nails. Si Xiaozhen on the side was still chattering, although his tone is not very good, but I think you just transferred your unhappiness with Xing Yuan to him. Alas, I really think you are. Si Xiaozhen was halfway through speaking, looked at Cecile Ruan's face, stopped talking, and did not say the remaining 4 words. Others don't know, but she thinks she knows Cecile Ruan enough. She lived alone with her father at the age of 14, and when he died of illness at the age of 18, she went to college alone. The money left by her father was only enough for her 4 years of tuition, and she lived on her own. There are no relatives at home, and she does not want to follow her mother, in this case. Such an environment forces her to be more independent than others, and it is more difficult to trust others easily, and many emotions are always digested silently by a person, showing a beautiful picture of the years. But after living like this for a long time, once she encountered a container that could hold all her emotions unconditionally, she poured her temper into it presumptuously. So Si Xiaozhen felt that she was used to Louis Fu always tolerating her indefinitely, so she vented her unhappiness with Xing Yuan and her anger towards Dong Xian on Louis Fu. That is, as the saying goes. Are you finished? Cecile Ruan waited for a long time without waiting for Si Xiaozhen's follow-up and asked, "What do you say about me?" "I think you just." Si Xiaozhen suddenly increased her speaking speed, pampered and arrogant. "What did you say?" "I said you were pampered and proud." "Pampered and proud." The words fell, and the room suddenly fell silent. Cecile Ruan looked at Si Xiaozhen, the two looked at each other, and no one spoke. Within a few seconds of being speechless, Cecile Ruan felt a shallow heat wave in her heart gently lap her chest, and quickly retracted, leaving a burning sensation. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Cecile Ruan rolled her eyes. "I can't wait to show off a few idioms." Si Xiaozhen shrugged her shoulders and also rolled her eyes and smiled dryly. "Whatever you want, I'm not leaving today, I'll go take a bath first." After taking 2 steps, she turned back and said, "I suggest you watch nonviolent communication." "Why are you talking so much today?" Got it. Si Xiaozhen clicked into the bathroom and slammed the door. The living room fell silent. Cecile Ruan slowly raised her legs and curled up on the sofa, ghostly opened Baidu and searched for nonviolent communication. Scroll to the table of contents. Chapter 1, Integrating Love into Life. Chapter 2, What Blinds Love. What book is this? What to Love or Not? Cecile Ruan closed the web page in anger and started to have fun. "I didn't clear it after playing a few times, and breaking the game was not interesting." Cecile Ruan quit the game, opened WeChat, swiped the circle of friends, and saw Louis Fu have an update for the first time. Shared a link. Asia's largest hangar officially topped out at Jiangqing New Airport. World Airlines Jiangqing New Airport base construction enters a new stage. It's really a calm and self-contained workaholic. Or give him a thumbs up. After all, today, because his aunt is coming, I threw a tantrum at him. Cecile Ruan moved his fingers, feeling as if sincerity wasn't enough. Although she usually blows up Louis Fu, but 1 yard to 1 yard, Louis Fu is indeed quite innocent today. So Cecile Ruan posted another comment, like, she touched her nose, thinking that Louis Fu was definitely not someone who would reply to her circle of friends, let alone such a non-nutritious comment. After waiting for a while, there was no response. Cecile Ruan suddenly found himself as if he had never seen Louis Fu's circle of friends, and he didn't know what people like him usually posted. Click inside to take a look. 5 months ago, World Airlines holds spring route product promotion meeting. A year ago, World Airlines HCC opens to the public, unveils the secret of the efficient operation of Jiangqing Hub in the summer. 2 years ago, World Airlines and Qatar Airways sign Memorandum of Understanding to sign code-share cooperation. Very good, the president is not down. At a young age of 28, he lived a 48-year-old posture. After quitting his circle of friends, Cecile Ruan hesitated and sent him a message anyway. Cecile Ruan, I'm sorry. The opposite side quickly replied with a message. Cecile Ruan, I was in a bad mood today, I didn't mean to lose my temper with you. After waiting a few seconds, Cecile Ruan saw the column in his head up that said the other party is typing. But after waiting for a while, he waited for him to say, in a meeting, got it. Okay. The next day also happened to be Si Xiaozhen's vacation day. Anyway, everyone was already here. She naturally would not let Cecile Ruan go, dragging her out. Cecile Ruan was tired and didn't want to move, so the two went to see a movie in the afternoon. After coming out, Si Xiaozhen went to eat hot pot as she wished. "Oh, it's so supportive, let's take a stroll." She hasn't even opened the door when I go to Bianxian at this time. I want to go home. Great weekend, don't be discouraged. Cecile Ruan had to go to the third floor downstairs to look at the clothes, see one to try one, and took 4 or 5 pieces of clothes at a time into it. While waiting for Cecile Ruan, Cecile Ruan sat on the sofa playing with her mobile phone. After a few rounds of dissipation, brushing the circle of friends, and looking at the logistics information of Taobao, Cecile Ruan has not yet come out. Cecile Ruan was bored, opened Weibo again, and swiped through all the new messages. Sometimes, as if forming a habit, after brushing Weibo, she would click in from recent visits to see Jingyuan's Weibo. Just yesterday, Jingyuan updated a Weibo and posted a photo signed by a star. My mother went abroad to participate in the exhibition and even helped me get an autograph photo. I love my mother. At this moment, Cecile Ruan came out of the fitting room, wearing a black dress, and stood in front of Cecile Ruan. All in Xinjiang Literature City, how about this? Cecile Ruan turned off the screen and nodded, yes. Okay, then this one, don't get tangled. Cecile Ruan ran back to the fitting room to undress. Cecile Ruan turned on his phone again, did not continue to read, and exited Weibo. On the way to Bianxian's store after buying clothes, Cecile Ruan found that Cecile Ruan seemed to have been depressed. What's wrong? Cecile Ruan walked slowly. The night market is noisy and bustling, and the smell of oil smoke is everywhere, full of fireworks, which is also very relaxing. Nothing, a little tired. Seeing that he was almost at Bianxian's shop, Cecile Ruan hesitated for a moment and said, do you want to go back? When you look up, you can see the sign of Bianxian's bar. Cecile Ruan shook his head, it's all here, go sit for a while. Cecile Ruan nodded hesitantly, good. There's a band playing tonight, let's stop for a while. As soon as they opened the door, Bianxian was walking in front of them with a tray. Coming, help me tidy up the bar, it's almost messy. After saying that, he left, without mercy. Cecile Ruan and Cecile Ruan really went to clean up the bar for her. About 10 minutes later, Bianxian walked over with a smile and squeezed next to Cecile Ruan and Cecile Ruan. Please try the new product today, it has not yet been released, you are the first to drink. She moves very cleanly, shakes the bartending with ice, and after a while makes 2 glasses of orange wine. Brand new, Sunset Boulevard, try it. Cecile Ruan took the lead in taking a sip. How many degrees is this? Bianxian thought for a moment, it's probably similar to Long Island iced tea. Cecile Ruan almost spewed out without a breath. Long Island iced tea. That's spirits. Why does this taste so sweet? How's that, isn't it? Bianxian raised his eyebrows. The female guest must like it, the degree is enough, and the taste is good. Okay, Cecile Ruan couldn't help but taste it again, turned to Cecile Ruan and asked, do you want to taste it? Cecile Ruan took it and took a large sip, until he swallowed it for a long time, before blinking, is this really wine? How is it so sweet? 2 girls said this in a row. Bianxian was also a little hesitant, took a sip, and said embarrassedly, oh, I put too much honey. Just like honey water. Beauty and beauty. Bianxian said and was about to pour it out, forget it, I'll make a new cup. Don't waste it, take it. Cecile Ruan reached out to her, I can only drink this taste. Of course, Bianxian was willing, gave the wine to Cecile Ruan, and turned to Cecile Ruan and said, I'll make you another glass. Not long after, the band came out to perform, and the atmosphere in the bar warmed up. Cecile Ruan took the wine, sat at the bar and hummed a whole song with the band. Hey, this little brother is a little handsome this time, just a little shorter, if you were taller. She said as she looked at Cecile Ruan, why did you finish drinking? Cecile Ruan picked up the empty wine glass in front of her in disbelief and shook it, although this tastes like honey water, it is wine. It's wine. It was useless to say anything at this time, after all, the person in front of her had already turned red with his whole face. It's kind of delicious. Cecile Ruan propped her chin and looked at her and smiled, why don't you drink it? Cecile Ruan, are you in a bad mood today? Cecile Ruan smiled and shook her head, no. Tell me honestly, what can't you tell me? Cecile Ruan reached out and touched her face, a little hot, is it your mother looking for you? Cecile Ruan still shook his head, no. Cecile Ruan suddenly fell silent, and looked at Cecile Ruan's eyes, with mixed tastes in her heart. This no, she was too distressed to hear. It's okay, Ruan. Cecile Ruan helped her cut her hair, let's go, I'll send you home. Are you going back? Let's go to bed early, or get dizzy. Well, good. Cecile Ruan didn't want to stay any longer, she just felt dizzy now, grabbed her bag and stood up. Cecile reached out to help her, and she waved her hand. She can't walk without a drink. But Cecile was still not very relieved, and took a taxi to the door of Minchin's apartment. Slow down on your way. Cecile Ruan waved his hand toward the window. Well, you go back early, talk to me when you arrive. Good, it's all at the door, and Cecile has nothing to worry about. And she has seen Cecile Ruan drinking, and knows that although she does not drink well, her ability to move and think will not be completely lost. And she will become soft and especially gentle when she drinks. Watching the taxi drive off-site, Cecile Ruan turned and headed home. The wind is very comfortable tonight, and there are many small insects flying around the halo of the street lamp. Like the alley where I lived as a child, the brightest street lamp always attracts the most mosquitoes, and Cecile Ruan will subconsciously bypass it every time he passes there. But sometimes I don't notice it, and I hit it headlong and scared half to death. Just like now. Cecile Ruan hurriedly retreated and walked around. 2 steps later, she glanced back. When she was a child, when she walked without looking at the road, Dong Xian would always pat her lightly on the head, but she would never scold her. She has always been a very gentle mother, and her temper is so good that the children in the neighborhood envy Cecile Ruan. Never scold the child, never hit the child, and never say something bad after getting the test paper. She is always patient and reasonable. Such a mother, which child is not envious? So Cecile Ruan actually envies Jing Yuan. Always envious. Taking the elevator upstairs, Cecile Ruan stood at the elevator entrance against the wall for a while. She rarely drinks alcohol, and does not know that it is actually very taboo to blow wind after drinking. Especially for people like her, who don't drink well, when the wind blows on her head, the feeling of dizziness is even heavier. She lowered her head and slowly walked to the door. The voice-activated light had already been turned on, and there was a back at the door. Cecile Ruan looked fixedly. Louis Fu, why is he here? For a moment in Cecile Ruan's days, Louis Fu turned to see Cecile Ruan and walked towards her. Stop a step away from her. Cecile Ruan was about to ask, but he suddenly leaned close to Cecile Ruan, so close that Cecile Ruan could feel his breathing. Did you drink? Louis Fu slowly stood up straight, his gaze from top to bottom. Cecile Ruan's cheeks were crimson, and even his eyes were hazy. Why are you drinking again? Again, I have drunk a total of 2 times this year, once when I graduated from the flight cadet to have dinner with my classmates, and once today. Where can I be called again? Cecile Ruan hung her head and didn't speak. The voice-activated lights went out due to the silence of the 2 people, and they couldn't see clearly in front of them, leaving only the smell of Louis Fu sensed by smell. Cecile Ruan thought the atmosphere was a little strange, so he stomped his foot, woke up the voice-activated light, and whispered, "Bad mood." Louis Fu can only see Cecile Ruan's lowered eyelashes from this angle, casting a faint light and shadow on the lower eyelid. He softened his voice and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's just a bad mood." Still angry. Cecile Ruan looked up at him, his eyes foggy, his cheeks crimson, and he lost his usual momentum. "Why are you here? I sent you a message, you didn't reply. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Oh, I didn't look at my phone. Are you looking for me?" Louis Fu's gaze fell on Cecile Ruan's face, and little by little, he found a fallen leaf on the hair next to her ear. He reached for it and asked at the same time, "Are you still angry?" The first scent on his body approached Cecile Ruan with this movement. She was slightly stunned. Louis Fu's wrist flickered in front of her eyes, but the scent of fur lingered for a long time. Cecile Ruan asked, "What am I angry about?" "Jing Yuan." Cecile Ruan opened her mouth, and suddenly her heart was poked. At the same time I wondered, did Louis Fu know anything? She looked at Louis Fu puzzled. "What am I angry with her?" Louis Fu looked down at her thoughtfully. "Then what kind of tantrums have you been making these days?" Cecile Ruan pondered this sentence carefully. Angry with Jing Yuan. Tantrum all in Xinjiang Literature City don't. After thinking for several seconds, a rush of heat rushed through Cecile Ruan's mind. So, Louis Fu has been thinking she is jealous these days. Eat Jing Yuan's vinegar. Eat his vinegar. Was it a plate in the last life, with such a big face?
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Landing on my heart. Chapter 27. To be honest, the word order, wording, and logic of this sentence are beyond the scope of Louis Fu's daily dabbling. So when he understood what Cecile Ruan meant, his heart jumped up and down, and the green tendons of his temples beat faintly. But the person in front of him didn't look at his face, and directly crossed him, supported the wall, to the door. On the door was a passcode fingerprint lock. Cecile Ruan didn't know what was going on today, and his thumb pressed twice and didn't unlock it. She wiped her fingers on her clothes, and pressed them again, and there was still only a drop-and-drop error sound. She was kicking the door with her toes in annoyance, and she was still chanting words in her mouth, but she couldn't hear what she was saying. And she didn't seem to realize she had the wrong hand. Looking at her drunken picture, Louis Fu took a deep breath, stepped forward, wrapped his arm around her, held her right hand, and pressed her thumb steadily, and whispered in her ear, "The mouth is so stubborn, sooner or later it will pry you open." At the same time, the door opened. Cecile Ruan was stunned at the door opening, and turned back and asked, "What did you say?" Louis Fu didn't speak, just looked at Cecile Ruan. The overhead light hit his face, but his eyes were a little shadowed by the high brow bone. From his eyes, Cecile Ruan saw a bit of helplessness and compromise. After a moment of staring at each other, Cecile Ruan was sure he had just heard correctly. How could he say such a thing? How embarrassing he is. "I'll pry your brain open sooner or later and see what's inside." With that, she opened the door and prepared to enter, and Louis Fu took her arm. "Cecile Ruan. Oh, you let me go." Cecile Ruan broke free of his hand, kicked off his shoes, walked barefoot to the refrigerator and took out a bottle of mineral water. Louis Fu stood behind her. It was quiet in the house, only the sound of Cecile Ruan looking up and swallowing mineral water. Seeing her cheeks crimson and standing barefoot, no matter how helpless she felt in her heart, she could only let her go up and down, but she didn't vent. "You're still not happy." She walked over to the couch and sat down, grabbed a throw pillow, curled her legs, and leaned her head tiltedly. Drunkenness floats in the eyes, turning into a mist. When he looked at Louis Fu, the corners of his mouth also turned down. "I'm not happy, but it's none of your business, understand? It's none of your business, don't think about it. Is it? So why are you drinking like this today? Can't drink with your mouth on me. And why should I be angry because of you? Who are you to me? Are you my boyfriend or my husband? How strange you are." Louis Fu's eyes darkened. It seemed to be getting particularly hot all around, and he pinned his head to the side, reaching out and loosening his tie. And just as he was about to say something, Cecile Ruan rolled over with a throw pillow, facing the corner of the sofa, burying his head in the pillow, and facing away from Louis Fu. "I just envy Jing Yuan." Her voice came out of the gap between the pillows. "I envy her so much." Her voice was low and hoarse, with a bit of drunkenness, sounding more fragile than ever. Louis Fu's heart suddenly softened a little. He walked over to the couch and bent down, his figure shrouded over Cecile Ruan. "Envy of what?" Cecile Ruan was muffled for a while before her voice came out muffled. "They are obviously not related, but they can be together every day." "What are you talking about?" "I'm pro, but I don't want me." Louis Fu didn't understand, reached out and brushed the hair from Cecile Ruan's cheek, and asked softly, "Who doesn't want you anymore?" "My mother." Louis Fu didn't know that her topic had suddenly come around her mother, but her voice had a hint of crying. "There was a blockage in my heart for no reason." "You." Louis Fu didn't say a word, and Cecile Ruan suddenly rolled over and looked at him with open eyes. The faces of the two were less than half a meter apart. Cecile Ruan tilted his head, while Louis Fu hung his head, his eyes facing each other, and was silent for a while. People are most eager to talk when they are half drunk and half awake, and many drunks grab someone and start talking from first love to brother's girlfriend. But Cecile Ruan didn't understand how she could say so much to Louis Fu. Obviously she didn't even say anything to Xi Xiaojun today. "Why are you still in my house?" Seeing Cecile Ruan's eyes, Louis Fu knew she was starting again. The hedgehog shrunk into its shell again. "You didn't close the door again. You come in before closing, so why don't you rob the bank if it doesn't close during the day?" Louis Fu closed his eyes, sighed, and said, "Cecile Ruan, can you talk to me properly? Are you leaving? What if I don't leave?" Cecile Ruan squeezed the pillow, lifted her chin to the window, and said viciously, "I'll let you do freefall, and the elevator will be saved." Louis Fu could only get up. However, he walked to the door, and when he looked back, he saw Cecile Ruan lying on the sofa, hugging the pillow, and just closed his eyes and slept. Louis Fu smiled helplessly. It's really not defensive at all. He suddenly turned around and returned to the sofa. The scent of fur belonging to Louis Fu was again smelled in his nose, and Cecile Ruan was hugged before he could open his eyes to see what he was going to do. "What are you doing?" Cecile Ruan stretched out her leg and kicked, but Louis Fu was very strong, clamped her tightly, let her struggle and did not let go, but smiled. You're a little heavy. What am I sinking? I'm only 100 and a few pounds. 100 and a few pounds is not heavy. I'm 172 tall. I'm still 87. It's all more than a meter. What are you shouting? You put me down. Otherwise I'll call the police. As she spoke, Louis Fu had gone into Cecile Ruan's room, put her on the bed, and leaned over her ear. If you want to sleep, go to bed, don't huddle on such a small sofa. Hearing this, Cecile Ruan lay flat on the bed, her hair messy, blinked her eyes stunnedly, and looked at Louis Fu, who was close at hand. But the next second, I heard him say, I'm sorry for my double annual salary if I broke it. You picky and doggy man. Take some money from you, you are very distressed. It really means that your iron rooster has insulted the iron rooster. People are so bad to lose some rest, you even worry about rest. When he was drunk, he could attack him with such clear and accurate thinking. I really don't know where the weak and pitiful appearance just now went. Louis Fu took a deep breath for the third time today and pulled the covers over her. Sleep. Cecile Ruan was still staring at him, but didn't speak. After a moment, she rolled over wrapped in a quilt, turned her back to him, and dropped the sentence, remember to close the door when you leave. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Half a minute later, the lights in the whole house went out, followed by a gentle closing of the door. Seeing Louis Fu go downstairs, Bai Yang, who was still waiting, quickly got out of the car. President Fu, it's almost 11 o'clock, are you going back to the Huguang mansion? Back. Before going out this morning, He Lanxiang specifically told him that he had to go back tonight and go to the hospital to visit an elder tomorrow morning. But after Bai Yan pulled the door, Louis Fu stood still. He touched the bag and found it empty, so he asked the driver for a cigarette. He stood under the street lamp, tilted his head and lit a cigarette, and the shadow was drawn very long. Louis Fu took a deep breath of the cigarette and slowly exhaled it, and the white mist lingered in front of him. It wasn't until a cigarette burned to the end that Louis Fu whispered, it's too hard to coax. Bai Yang waited quietly, not daring to ask anything. Since he knew that Louis Fu came out of the company today to return to the Mingchen apartment to find Cecile Ruan, he decided to stay silent. He couldn't afford either of these two artillery battles. Extinguishing the cigarette, Louis Fu turned and got into the car. In the distance, the neon lights were blurred, and the shadowy light reflected on Louis Fu's face. He closed his eyes and felt a faint sense of exhaustion between his brows. The car drove smoothly, but he didn't sleep. At this point, the surroundings were quiet, and he had the mind to ponder what Cecile Ruan had to say. When he was about to get out of the car, Louis Fu suddenly said to Bai Yang, go and get to know Jing Yuan. And the matter of Mrs. Zheng. This sudden task was a little headless, but Bai Yang did not dare to ask, nodded and said yes. When he arrived at the Huguang mansion, Louis Fu just entered the door and felt that the atmosphere around him was not right. All in Xinjiang Literature City, he took off his coat, handed it to Aunt Luo next to him, and asked, what's wrong? Aunt Luo frowned slightly and said in a low voice, I'm not happy again. Louis Fu walked towards the living room, and sure enough, he saw He Lanxiang sitting on the sofa, his back straight, and his body was full of I'm not happy, don't mess with me. That Louis Fu naturally didn't mess with her, and walked directly towards the second floor. But disaster cannot be avoided, and it will always come. He Lanxiang's voice came faintly, why, I don't say hello when I come back, when I am a sculptor. Louis Fu reluctantly stopped and turned around, what's wrong? He Lanxiang took the bird's nest in front of him, took a sip slowly, wiped the corners of his mouth, and then spoke, how do you say there is such a person? What people? As far as tonight's private auction, everyone knows that I went to Master Yu Sanlin's painting. I had all the money ready, and when I came to see, oh, the master's painting is not in the auction, guess what? Louis Fu untied his tie, unbuttoned, and lazily coped, what's wrong? Dong Xian, she has long been secretly Chen Song and bought the painting in private. Louis Fu didn't have the heart to listen anymore, turned around and continued upstairs, you can too. What do you mean? He Lanxiang said and chased after him, and Louis Fu naturally couldn't go any further. He sighed and said, this is not the first case, since it is a private auction, she is not a rule breaker, at most her mind is a little more active. Oh, meaning or is it my fault? Blame me for not thinking of it in advance. Louis Fu opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but thought about it. People don't have much, do you see that the other people at the auction are so angry with you? Seeing his appearance, He Lanxiang was even more angry, what attitude do you have? Anyone else? What do you call someone else? Do you think like your father that other women are well-behaved and sensible, and I am unreasonable, and I am vexatious? Nope, He Lanxiang snorted, intending to let Louis Fu go. Louis Fu didn't know what to think of, and said, "It's all the same." He Lanxiang was stunned before he reacted to what Louis Fu meant, and scolded Louis Fu's back upstairs. "Louis Fu, you unfilial son." Closing the door to the study, Louis Fu sat down at the table, tilted his head and closed his eyes. The phone rang and Bai Yang called. Let him understand about the Jing family's affairs. In fact, it doesn't take much work. It's just that Louis Fu usually doesn't care about other people's family affairs, so he doesn't know anything. Louis Fu picked up the phone, and Bo Young was there to put together the information he had learned. Zheng Dong and the current Mrs. Jing are married for the second time. Zheng Dong's wife died of illness not long after giving birth to Miss Jing. The current Mrs. Jing also has an ex-husband, but he has also died for a long time. Bai Yang paused and said the most critical information he found. Mrs. Jing had a daughter before, Cecile Ruan, all in Jinjiang Literature City. Louis Fu's heart suddenly jumped. After a long silence, Louis Fu hung up. He closed his eyes again and sorted out the events of these days. In fact, it is not difficult. As long as he knows the relationship between Cecile Ruan and Jing Yuan, he will know everything. It turns out that she is not hard-mouthed. It turns out that her emotions in the past few days really have nothing to do with him. Embarrassment was fleeting, replaced by an inexplicable anxiety and a feeling of emptiness. Louis Fu raised his hand to untie the cuff and snapped and slammed it on the table. Landing on my heart. Chapter 28. The next morning, Cecile Ruan woke up to an alarm. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling for a long moment before she pulled her consciousness back. However, the moment he got up and got out of bed, he had to scold Bian Xian for selling fake wine with a black heart. This head hurts too much. After walking to the living room, she was stunned, and almost raised the little hand that called the police. She was greeted by pillows that had fallen on the floor, shoes from east to west, small blankets on the sofa hanging crookedly on the edge of the coffee table, and her bag was buttoned upside down, and the contents were scattered all over the floor. But within seconds she regained her senses. This picture of the house is not a thief, but Louis Fu forcibly picked her up from the couch last night. The memory pressed the turn button from here, and Cecile Ruan's body felt as if it was unconsciously recalled. Looking at the sofa, she remembered that when Louis Fu picked her up, her body was so close to him that she couldn't break free. I went to the door and put on my slippers, and I remembered that he had circled her from behind her back, reached out and held her hand, put his chin on the side of her head, and with a slight twist of his head, he saw the curve of his jaw. Looking back at the room, she remembered him leaning over her bed, enveloped by his breath, unable to move, and his tie dangling gently in front of her eyes. Hiss! Cecile Ruan folded her arms and looked around warily. Every time I look at a corner, the picture of Louis Fu flashes in my mind frame by frame. How did this dog-man manage to make her home full of his shadow? Cecile Ruan quickly put on her slippers and went into the bathroom to take a shower. While the hot water washes away the fatigue, it also takes away the emotions of the past few days. Last night, I drank alcohol, my temper was lost, I made a fuss, and my heart seemed to be dredged all at once. Things still exist, but there is no sense of blockage. She dried her hair and went back to the living room to clean up, picking up a pack of cigarettes on the floor. I picked it up and looked at it, and only 2 or 3 of them moved inside. You don't have to think about it to know whose it is. Cecile Ruan put the cigarette in the coffee table drawer, and the moment she closed it, the image of Louis Fu smoking suddenly flashed in her mind. Stand relaxed, with one hand in his pocket, head tilted, eyes drooping, silhouettes looming in the firelight. It's also strange to look good. Well, Cecile Ruan was suddenly stunned. She had never seen Louis Fu smoking at all. How could such an image come to mind? At this moment, the doorbell suddenly rang, interrupting Cecile Ruan's thoughts. She got up to open the door, and a delivery man handed over a bag of things. "Hello, your breakfast, please use it slowly." With his last experience, Cecile Ruan wasn't too surprised. She looked at the receipt, it was indeed her name, and accepted the takeaway. Inside is a bowl of lean porridge with green vegetables, a cup of hot soy milk, and 2 pieces of date cake. It was her usual favorite breakfast. Cecile Ruan took a sip of soy milk, and the sweetness lingered on the tip of his tongue. She thought about it and felt that she still had to talk to Louis Fu. So she flipped to Louis Fu's WeChat and sent a sentence over. "Cecile Ruan, breakfast received, thank you. After sending it, she also did not expect the busy Louis Fu to reply in seconds, drinking porridge while watching unread messages. The list went down, and Si Xiaozhen sent her a message 20 minutes ago. Si Xiaozhen, are you awake? Afraid that you will oversleep and feel uncomfortable, I ordered you breakfast, remember to eat it. Cecile Ruan looked at the news and was stunned for several seconds. Not Louis Fu's point. She immediately refound Louis Fu's WeChat and withdrew the message as quickly as possible. However, just at the moment when she released her finger, a message came from the other side. Louis Fu, not me. Louis Fu, don't think about it. Cecile Ruan, who thought too much? Cecile Ruan, I just made a mistake, sorry. Louis Fu, oh, why don't you believe it yet? Cecile Ruan suddenly felt that this soy milk was not sweet, and the porridge was not fragrant. How is Louis Fu like this? Obviously yesterday he was still making himself amorous, why did it become as if she was self-inflicted amorous today? Still looking disbelieving. The more Cecile Ruan thought about it, the more angry he became, and took a picture of breakfast on his mobile phone and sent it to a circle of friends. On the other side, Louis Fu was standing next to the hospital bed, and Helan Xiang was shushing her cousin. The two chatted for a long time, and Louis Fu wandered away, staring at a flower on the branch leaning in by the window. I don't know how long I watched it, turned my head, Helan Xiang still talked non-stop, my aunt was also in good spirits, and I felt that I could immediately pull out the needle and go to Milan with her to fight for 3 days and 3 nights. With topics in his ears that he wasn't interested in, Louis Fu took out his phone and looked at it. Open WeChat, the interface is still stuck in the dialog box with Cecile Ruan. The other party did not reply, so he withdrew, glanced at the circle of friends, and the small pattern in the upper right corner was officially Cecile Ruan's avatar. He clicked in and looked, and half a minute ago, she had posted a picture of a breakfast. Thank you baby for breakfast, love you Moda. Louis Fu knew what Cecile Ruan meant. He squinted and looked out the window again, feeling inexplicably irritable. The gaze returned to the phone again. Louis Fu clicked into Cecile Ruan's circle of friends to see if she had posted anything in the past 2 days, and his content was ignored by him. However, as soon as he entered, the background of Cecile Ruan's Moments album caught Louis Fu's eye. Black on a white background, a very arrogant line. Come and see me again, admit it, you just like me. Louis was. He turned off his phone. It's really better not to look at this time-wasting thing in the circle of friends. After mistaking Louis Fu for breakfast, Cecile Ruan felt that this person would definitely seize the opportunity to show off his presence in front of her. However, this time she miscalculated, and Louis Fu was very disoriented. Of course, maybe it was because he was busy. Anyway, he never appeared again. The two met again one morning, 5 days later. Cecile Ruan arrived at the World Airlines on time to prepare for her last flight before she officially became a co-pilot. In the early morning of World Airlines, Cecile Ruan was dressed in uniform, pulling a flight case, and when he passed the large conference room of the flight department, the door suddenly opened inward. Then footsteps sounded. Cecile Ruan inexplicably felt that it was probably Louis Fu. She stopped to look over, and sure enough she saw him. Behind the door, the lights were bright, and the attendees were silent and watched Louis Fu come out. He seemed to be in a bad mood, with one hand in his pocket, his brows slightly clustered, and strode out, making the air around him cold by 2 degrees. Cecile Ruan was standing less than 5 meters from the door, a position where Louis Fu was bound to meet him. 2 or 3 steps later, Louis Fu saw Cecile Ruan. However, the eyes met briefly, and just as Cecile Ruan opened his mouth to say hello, he turned his head sideways to listen to what the assistant had said, and stopped looking at Cecile Ruan. A group of people walked past Cecile Ruan. When Bai Yang then walked out, his footsteps paused and he wanted to say hello. But seeing that Louis Fu didn't react just now, he thought that the two of them had another fight last time, maybe this time it was incompatible, or don't light the cannon, and turn around and blow him up in place into the most gorgeous fireworks in the sky. After all the people in the conference room left, silence returned to the surroundings. Cecile Ruan glanced back at Louis Fu's back, her brows slowly wrinkled. She was thinking carefully about the night she was drunk. Had she forgotten what she had done to offend him? Hit Louis Fu. No, you shouldn't be able to beat him. Scolding too much. There should be none. It was he who had to follow up and did not leave. She was already very polite when she spoke. Or did he say something that hurt his self-esteem? No, Cecile Ruan suddenly came back to his senses. Why should I reflect here? Louis Fu has never played cards according to the routine. How can she use the thinking of a normal person to analyze his behavior pattern? And he loves as much as he wants, and she can't control it. She secretly cursed herself in her heart, pulled the box, and strode away. Today's flight is also a coincidence. Cecile Ruan flew the rear for the last time, and the crew happened to be Captain Fan and co-pilot Yu, who flew for the first time. The three of them have been combined several times during this period, and they are also familiar. After getting on the plane, Captain Fan and co-pilot Yu sat in the front seat, both of them looking relaxed. Today Jiangqing flew to the city. This field flew in 2 sections. The route was familiar, the weather conditions were good, everything was perfect. After preparation, it took off smoothly, and half an hour later, the plane entered the state of cruise autopilot. Captain Fan brought a cup of red jujube tea and turned around. Cecile Ruan, next week you will officially be the co-pilot. You can say hello to the flight department. The first time is I will take you. Oh, good. Cecile Ruan nodded and fell silent again. What are you thinking? Captain Fan asked suddenly. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan hesitated for a moment and said, you say, a man suddenly. Halfway through, she caught a glimpse of Vice Pilot Yu on the side, whose face was not very good. What's wrong with you? Vice President Yu covered his right upper abdomen, and his lips turned a little white. Hiss, I'm a little sore here. After that, he said to Captain Fan, I may have diarrhea, I'll go to the toilet. Captain Fan nodded and put on an oxygen mask while Vice Pilot Yu got up. Leaving a co-pilot, Captain Fan stopped making small talk. A few minutes later, Vice Pilot Yu returned, and Captain Fan took off his oxygen mask again and continued the topic just now. Cecile Ruan, what did you just say about a man? Cecile Ruan didn't answer because she had just noticed something was wrong with Vice Officer Yu when he came in. Are you uncomfortable somewhere? Cecile Ruan leaned over and asked, your face is so bad, and you still have sweat on your forehead. As soon as Captain Fan heard this, he also immediately went to see Vice Pilot Yu. Cecile Ruan said quite softly, his whole person could not sit up straight, his hands tightly covered his right upper abdomen, his face was pale, and bean-sized sweat droplets flowed from his face to his neck. What's wrong with you? Captain Fan asked in surprise. Vice Pilot Yu's lips were also completely bloodless, and he opened his mouth for a long time before he spoke. I don't know, I suddenly hurt so much here, I may not be able to hold on to lynching. Are you sure? Captain Fan asked again, serious enough to hold out in lynching. Vice Pilot Yu himself thought about it. But in the next second, a sharp pain in his right upper abdomen hit again, and his whole body began to shiver. I don't feel like it. Cecile Ruan wiped the sweat from Yu's face with a tissue and probed his forehead. Captain, he's having a fever. Captain Fan stared at Vice Pilot Yu for a few seconds, and suddenly cursed. Damn, it's mostly acute cholecystitis, and my wife has had it too. It was precisely because Elder Fanji's wife had this disease, so he knew that this thing was life-threatening when it was serious. A few seconds later, he said, Cecile Ruan, you change positions with him, you sit in the co-pilot, and then call the third flight attendant to come in and take care of him, let the safety officer take the position of the number 3, and then ask the purser to ask if there are any medical personnel. Cecile Ruan did so. And after a while, the third flight attendant came in and brought the purser's words. There are no medical personnel on this flight. The co-pilot Yu beside him was still moaning in pain, and Captain Fan frowned and looked at him for a few seconds, and finally sat down to make a decision. Cecile Ruan, let the purser inform the cabin that we are now ready to land at Fudu Airport. Good. After a while, the cabin notification broadcast sounded. At the same time, Cecile Ruan put on a headset and sunglasses, looked at the dashboard, and said, now there are about 30 minutes before Fudu Airport, and it is expected that the landing will be 1.5 tons overweight. After she finished speaking, she looked at Captain Fan, waiting for him to make a decision. Well, you can land. Captain Fan said, prepare for a backup. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan has no objection to this. Whether it is the physical condition of the current co-pilot Yu or according to the airworthiness standard, she feels that she can land overweight. If she were in the driver's seat, she would have made that decision as well. But the second co-driver Yu, who was almost unable to say anything, objected. No, overweight landing will cause unsafe incidents, no. You shut up. Captain Fan said angrily, I am the captain, I know it in my heart. Now it is under the takeoff weight, as long as the rate is controlled below 360 feet per minute, how can I not land safely? If something happens to me, All the consequences will be borne by me. But after he finished speaking, Vice Pilot Yu still disagreed, saying that he could still hold out until the plane's fuel consumption was below the maximum landing weight. In short, he did not agree with overweight landing. Captain Fan was usually soft-spoken, but by this time, the tone was as hard as Cecile Ruan had never heard. Seeing that the two were about to argue, Cecile Ruan said softly, "Captain, consume fuel. This is a compromise." Captain Fan sighed helplessly, "Okay, you have to insist on it yourself. But there is no fuel drain device on the plane, and they can only find a way to consume the amount of fuel." Cecile Ruan kept an eye on the dashboard, and when the plane landed at 15,000 feet, she asked, "Captain, now put down the landing gear." Captain Fan nodded, "Put." Lowering the landing gear is not to prepare for landing. They just want to increase fuel consumption and get it below the maximum landing weight as soon as possible. All in Xinjiang Literature City, the flight altitude is slowly decreasing, and the co-pilot Yu behind him can't even moan. Cecile Ruan comforted in a low voice, "Senior brother Yu, you hold on a little longer, soon." There was no answer behind him. Captain Fan took a deep breath and said, "Xiao Ruan, prepare to use the speed brake to further increase fuel consumption." Cecile Ruan was about to say yes, but the man behind him who didn't have the strength to moan said, "No, no." Captain Fan ignored co-pilot Yu at all, and he was so anxious behind him that he was almost crying. World Airlines stipulates that engine thrust exceeding 66% when using speed brakes is considered a QAR Level 3 event. If this happens, it will seriously affect Vice Pilot Yu's future promotion, bonus, income, etc. Although Cecile Ruan also wanted to scold a garbage rule, but he couldn't really turn a blind eye. He couldn't dissuade Captain Fan. After all, on an airplane, the captain is an absolute right. Sure enough, Vice Pilot Yu began to hold on and said, "Reduce again, reduce QA again." Before he could finish speaking, Captain Fan interrupted him, "You fucking shut up for me. I'm saving your life right now. Is your life important or QAR important?" I don't know if Vice Pilot Yu really didn't have the strength to speak or compromised. In short, the back seat was quiet. Nearly an hour later, the plane landed at Fudu Airport. As the plane slowly approached the covered bridge under the guidance of the flight attendant, Cecile Ruan glanced back at the co-pilot Yu. His clothes were completely wet with sweat, his eyes were closed, his lips were slightly open, and he was panting with difficulty. While the plane stopped, the ambulance was ready, and the medical staff entered the cockpit to help you out. But when he arrived at the hatch, he suddenly looked back at Cecile Ruan, "Help, do me a favor." "What, you co-pilot, my mobile phone password is 6/8. You can help me report peace to my girlfriend in a moment." Cecile Ruan nodded and said yes, and the co-pilot Yu went down. In the previous few flights, Cecile Ruan knew his habit, and every time he landed, he would send a message to his girlfriend to report that he was safe. Captain Fan walked out, watched Yu get into the ambulance, and did not forget to scold him. But fortunately, it landed safely, and Cecile Ruan breathed a sigh of relief and went to find the mobile phone of the co-pilot Yu. After calling her girlfriend to explain the situation, Cecile Ruan touched her phone. She had just turned on the internet when a phone call came in. The phone number was not stored, but she knew whose it was. Once there is a temporary change in the flight of World Airlines, the flight department will immediately inform him, so he is the only one who can accurately know the landing time and call. But the thought of his appearance this morning made Cecile Ruan not really want to take it. After the bell rang for a while, Cecile Ruan picked up. "Hey, Mr. Fu." "Landed, The head was silent for a moment. "Louis Fu probably doesn't know which pilot is wrong yet, so call him." Cecile Ruan looked down at his fingers, his thumb lightly clasped the nails of his index finger, and was about to say, "Don't worry, your double annual salary is fine," but listened to him, then return and hand over a detailed accident report immediately. It was so important to think that Louis Fu immediately called to care about him.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.